The Spinoff Podcast Network.
Is it mad that the world burning is not in our, top 3 concerns? You thought bad news was done, but I'm back with more. In Alice Snedden's Bad News Saves the World, I finally address the climate crisis and explore why no one cares. Watch it on thespinoff.co.nz.
I can see the anxiety starting to emit from you.
When the Facts Change is brought to you by the Spinoff Podcast Network, in partnership with Kiwibank, the bank for Kiwi looking to get ahead in business and in life. A bank that delivers expertise in banking know-how, smart advice for business owners wanting to invest, grow their business or diversify. A bank that adapts with technology through the lens of its people and customers. It is a bank with heart that is driven by its purpose. Kiwi making Kiwi better off.
Tēnā koutou katoa, I'm Michael Andrew, the Spinoff's business editor. In this month's bonus episode of When the Facts Change, I spoke to Ranjit Jayanandhan, General Manager of Kiwibank's Foundation Tech Experience Hub. As the person leading Kiwibank's digital innovation journey, Ranjit has a unique perspective into how banking and fintech will change in New Zealand and the increasing role technology plays in the customer experience. So Ranjit, what exactly does the General Manager of Foundation Tech Experience Hub at Kiwibank do?
On a day-to-day basis, I'd like to say I am responsible for helping a team of highly talented engineers, product managers, technology architects, and delivery managers to create some of the foundational tech blocks that we need from a banking perspective to create better outcomes for our customers. In addition to that, the other part of my role is to ensure that we're able to think about what the future state of banking is going to look like and what foundational elements we need to support that future state, which means thinking more broadly about leveraging tools and processes that exist elsewhere and trying to get us to that future state. Again, it's all about trying to get those experiences faster out to our customers, getting feedback from them quicker, and incrementally layering some of those enhancements to our digital offerings when there's either a need for it or a demand for it.
Okay, so you're right in the thick of things at Kiwibank. You started at the beginning of the year, and it's, I guess, an incredibly exciting time to begin such a role. We're seeing this eruption of innovation and technology adoption around the world and in New Zealand. And it sounds like your role with Kiwibank is to make sure that it's a part of the journey here in New Zealand. Where would you say Kiwibank is so far with the adoption of this new technology and rolling it out to your customers?
Spot on, Michael. There's a massive interest across the globe for a lot of these. I think every industry to get to that point where we are constantly innovating or trying to stay relevant to provide the best possible outcomes for our customers. So as far as Kiwibank is concerned, we've started this journey. It's been almost about 2 years since we've been into this journey, and we've tried to figure out what it is that we need to build and what changes do we need to make in order for us to stay relevant. And there's a lot of interest across the board to kind of accelerate and move to that modern tech stack that'll provide not only the stability that we need in order to support the future state, but also make changes faster, keep up with the demands for our customers. And it's also about not just changing the technology, but about the mindset. And we're probably right at the start of that mindset change for our customers as well, because when I think about it, the ways of working has kind of shifted with COVID quite a bit. And what that has meant is that lots of people working from home, so collaboration happens remotely. And when you have those sort of things happening, people start becoming a little bit more creative about how we can achieve outcomes. And what we recognized very quickly was that we need to start thinking about how our modern platforms that we have, not only for our customers, but also for our internal staff, are upgraded and ready and capable of being able to do what we needed to do in order for us to build those capabilities for our customers.
So can you give me an example of the type of technology that's being rolled out internally that's considered an advancement?
From my perspective, when we think about the technology, again, I try to think about it from a foundational block perspective. And if you look traditionally at banking, you would think about standing things up ourselves and using an on-premise model. But now we're looking more at a cloud-based shift in technology. So thinking about software as a service, looking at offerings across the globe that would provide us that capability, thinking about how do we become cloud native whilst also making sure that our customers' information is safe, our customers' data is safe, and more importantly, their money is safe. So thinking about what that right balance is of where we keep the technology stack that we have today versus what we try to think about moving into the cloud.
Do you think your customers are ready to engage with this type of new technology? And I know it's probably manifesting itself as a movement to primarily online banking. Would you say your customers are embracing this shift?
Absolutely. I think what we have seen is that more than 80% of our customers, and this is like even before COVID, was that a good number of our customers were using our digital channels. That's our mobile app, internet banking, website on a fairly regular basis. From some of the research that we've seen, this is way higher than our peers in the New Zealand market. I think the reason for this is because Kiwibank is relatively new into the market. If you were to think about it, we started in 2002, and therefore we'd be a millennial. And a lot of the millennials who kind of came of age with Kiwibank, came of age with the advent of mobile banking, smartphones, the Apple iPhone, etc. So I think internet banking is second nature to a lot of our customers, and therefore it's been an easier shift for some of those folks to kind of go, all right, this is how we want to do things, and therefore it is being provided by Kiwibank, and therefore we have a good uptake of digital technologies with our customer base.
Okay, so they're definitely poised to take up this new technology because they're already having embraced it from the get-go, right?
Agreed, yep.
Okay. You've worked extensively in the US for companies like Oracle, so you have an inside perspective into how technology is changing and progressing both fintech and startups overseas, right?
That's right. If I take the US example, it's a much bigger market than New Zealand, and there's obviously some benefits that come out of having a bigger pool of people who work in a similar kind of field. In New Zealand, for example, if you compare the number of people coming out into the market from a tech perspective, there's about 5,000 universities in the US versus 8 in New Zealand. So the scale is much larger. And the other big difference is that the scale of investments flowing into the financial sector or the financial technology sector in the US is much larger as well. So there's a few market differences between the US versus New Zealand. Despite of all that, I think New Zealand is still punching above its weight in terms of innovation. And one of the things that we've also seen is that COVID has actually accelerated the acceptance and adoption of some of these digital banking technologies across the board. And therefore, we're in a better position than we were probably 5 years ago.
That's good to hear, because I think it's almost a common lament that you hear New Zealand's lagging behind the rest of the world as far as fintechs and startups and technological adoption goes. But you're saying we're actually doing quite well despite our relatively small scale.
Yeah, I think it's again one of those things where I read a news article the other day which said that since COVID, the digital uptake in New Zealand over the 10-week period of the lockdown was higher than what it was in the 5 years. So it's a good momentum that has built up behind the COVID wave, which I think it has actually pushed a lot of people into being digitally savvy, and then that first barrier has been crossed, and now it's really about pushing it a little further and trying to see where we can get to in terms of additional innovation, etc. And this is where I think our friends doing the fintech work in financial technologies will effectively help us push that a little bit out in terms of innovation, creativity, etc.
You mentioned COVID. Would you say that COVID had an effect on the way people and customers engage with their banks?
Oh, absolutely. With the branch closures, etc., during COVID, there's been a change in the way that people have been forced almost into using digital tools to do the functions that they potentially would have, walked into a branch to do or have done via phone banking. It almost made it give it that much needed push in the right direction. And from that point on, it was very much about all right, how do we make these experiences as awesome as possible for our customers? And we're at that point, and COVID has definitely helped with that.
And that's where you come into it, of course, right? Because starting at this nexus, at this point where you're trying to augment this customer experience and make it as compelling as possible with more people engaging Kiwibank online and digitally.
That's right, yeah. We're really at that starting point where we want to think about how can we make the best out of that momentum that has been created. How do we invest in the right set of technologies? How do we invest in the right set of tools? And also be able to kind of like go back to thinking about, customers and their outcomes that we want for those customers, and making sure we're giving it the best possible lens from that perspective as well.
Very good. So I wanted to touch on how you compare the technologies that have been developed overseas to what's emerging in New Zealand. You probably can't go into specifics on what kind of tech you've seen, but would you say New Zealand is picking up what's been developed overseas, or even preempting what's emerging in places like the US?
I think so. I think we're starting to get to that point where if we were to ask this question 10 years ago, it's all about in-house development of a various number of technologies to kind of keep up with the market, etc. But now what's happening is that there's this wide array of tools that you can buy off the shelf that provide base functionality that you can use in your product offerings. And I think one of the things that we want to try and do from a Kiwibank perspective, and also I think most organizations around the world, is to not reinvent the wheel. If someone solved the problem, then may as well use that to solve our own problems. And it may not be in the same industry, for example, but it is a similar problem. And at the heart of it, it's all about figuring out what it is that those technology or what those specific products offer, and seeing which of those specific offerings are relevant to us, and making sure we can get those pieces of technology into the organization and then customize it and build on top of it so that we are able to provide those outcomes for our customers.
Another issue you commonly hear in New Zealand, especially within the startup community, is that it's very difficult to, one, access capital here, and the other, access talent. Would you say, especially in the last year since COVID, that that's something you're observing, a lack of talent and difficulty recruiting the right kind of people?
Definitely from a talent perspective, yeah. It's become very obvious to us that there's a shortage of talent in New Zealand. Now it's looking a lot worse than it was probably in the last year, where everyone's competing for the same set of people to work on very similar types of problems. And one of the things that Kiwibank's finding is it's quite hard to find the right set of people to work on the new tech stacks that we want them to work on.
Can you explain what a tech stack actually is?
A tech stack is effectively all the pieces of technology tools that you may need to run an efficient process. And if I were to give you an example, it would be internet banking. There's probably about 4 or 5 different applications that prop up all the functionality that you see on front of your screen. And the pieces of functionality would involve taking a piece of data from our back-end systems all the way to the front-end systems that give you a sense of, here's what my balance looks like, for example. So each of those systems that the data interacts with on its way to making it to the screen, there's a bunch of things that happen, and the tech stack is effectively any piece of kit that sits across that spectrum of systems that allow you to eventually see what your balance looks like on a front-end screen.
All right, I'm beginning to understand how complicated your job is. It sounds like a lot to take in.
There's a few things, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. On the talent issue, there's also the capital issue, which you hear a lot of startups talking about in New Zealand and a lot of companies, and it's also seen to be responsible for this exodus of companies that are being bought up overseas, you got your Vens and Timely. Based on your experience overseas, is that what you think is a factor as to why these companies aren't staying in New Zealand and moving elsewhere?
I don't think they're necessarily moving. It's more of those organizations or those companies get to a certain point of maturity where the next natural step for them is to be acquired by an organization that is bigger. And again, given the size of New Zealand, some of those organizations may not exist in New Zealand. One of the big things that we've been hearing is that those specific organizations, they have a solid set of tools that they have built themselves. And now there's a desire for another organization or a competitor to take those tools and make it their own. I don't think the lack of capital is a concern anymore, because there is quite a bit of capital flowing in the New Zealand market, especially for, good ideas. Although it's not as well established as it would be in the US, where, you have your Silicon Valleys and you have a bunch of investors who are ready to take on those ideas and run with it. We don't necessarily have that sort of framework in place in New Zealand. It's a matter of scale, and as well as the fact that we've started on this journey much later than a lot of those other countries. But that being said, I think I've read a recent article which said that we were definitely punching above our weight in terms of fintech innovation, and we've gone up in the rankings in terms of where we were probably a year ago to where we are today.
Okay, that's great to hear.
When the Facts Change is brought to you in partnership with Kiwibank to help you understand the issues affecting the economy. And that's what their team of experts is here to do too. Here's Kiwibank's Chief Economist Jared Kerr on what's happening with inflation in 2024.
Globally, inflation rose to really high levels. We saw inflation averaging over 10% last year. Now central banks have reacted. They've tightened monetary policy. They've lifted interest rates to levels where it hurts. We've seen growth slow down, and we're seeing inflation coming off, which is great news because we import a lot of inflation from the rest of the world, and that imported inflation is easing. So half the job that we're trying to do locally is being done for us offshore. The other half, the domestic bit, well, that's the tough bit. That's the sticky inflation that's coming out of our housing market. It's coming out of construction. It's coming out of service industries, and it's going to be hard to contain.
Visit kiwibank.co.nz to stay up to date with detailed economic analysis and forecasts from Jared and other Kiwibank experts. They take big issues from both here and overseas and make them relevant to Kiwi businesses.
Skinny are helping you show how smart you are with the 1Q quiz, an all-new, super challenging and super quick daily quiz built by the Spinoff. Every Monday, Skinny are giving you the chance to prove you're smart with the Skinny Extra Credit question. Get it right, and you'll get the chance to score yourself some Skinny Extra mobile credit, so you can text, call, or even video call your group chat and gloat about how big your brain is. T's and C's apply.
Are you making the most of your KiwiSaver investment? Generate is an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of strong long-term performance. Making a smart decision now could add tens of thousands of dollars by the time you reach retirement. Book a no-obligation chat with a Generate KiwiSaver advisor today at generatekiwisaver.co.nz/get-advice. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
In terms of attracting talent to New Zealand, I mean, when you came from the US, it was in 2016, right?
That's right, yep.
So what exactly do you think a specialist working in the tech industry is looking for in a job based on your own experience? Is it just remuneration, or is it creativity, or is it freedom to practice your craft as you would like? What explains the movement of tech workers?
I think remuneration is obviously an important one, but it's not the only thing, right? I think the technologists usually end up looking for interesting problems to solve. It's a very logical and science-based process, but there's also an art to it. So there's a lot of creativity that comes into solving those difficult problems. And there's always constraints that technologists have to work with. So, if it is a constrained environment, then there's an ability for a technologist to kind of shine and show that creativity and that for that to come through. Obviously, people are looking for good work-life balance, which I think most organizations now recognize that and offer that as a package deal. There's not a whole lot of companies you see today not promoting remote work or parental leave, etc. So all those good stuff that comes with it. And at the heart of it, technologists really like that flexibility, being empowered, being able to make decisions, having autonomy and working with a team. And I think if you were to package all those things up, you'd make a person who works in technology or a technologist or an engineer quite happy to come and work for you.
Very good. I was talking to a startup that had launched in Westport, of all places, a few years ago, and they had managed to attract some former Silicon Valley staff to this tiny town of 4,000 people. And it seemed like lifestyle and the connection to nature was a major factor.
Absolutely. And I think, if we were to be able to attract talent from outside of the country, and this was one of the things that we can market ourselves as Kiwis, is that it's a great place to come and live, especially post-COVID. We're, come up on top as most livable cities, both Auckland and Wellington, featuring that top 10 list. Yeah, from that perspective, definitely. And there's a lot of interest in roles from overseas folk, like more than we've seen in the last couple of years this year. But unfortunately for us, it's a longer waiting period if we were to hire people externally than we were to try and find talent in New Zealand. One of the things that we have been doing is looking more closely at the interns and grads who are coming out of universities in the country. And I think that's one good way to develop that tech talent and that tech pool in the country.
Yeah, obviously you've got this emerging wave every year of talented New Zealanders that can't travel overseas anymore, and this is a resource that needs to be tapped, right?
Yeah, people who would have gone on an OE and done work in the UK or the US, now you don't have those opportunities presenting itself as much as it would have in the last few years. So this year you'd especially be looking at that group of people who would have potentially gone and worked in an overseas market. There's some good opportunities there, but then again, it's still a smaller pool than you would find in, say, Europe or the US.
So where do you see the future of banking heading? It's in the short term, both in the long term as well.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of innovation around how to make the banking process a lot more seamless. So if we break down any process that we have today in the bank, if it's lending or starting up a new account, etc., there's a series of steps that need to be completed before we get to that point. The goal is to be able to make sure that that is a lot more seamless. The other part is, there's a lot more emphasis being put on financial literacy right from an early age on. So we've done some work with schools through Banker, one of the organizations that we partner with, and we'll be seeing a lot more of that financial literacy piece playing out. It's always good to start off that journey right at the start, as opposed to getting into your 20s and realizing that you need to start a bank account. I think people are starting to realize that very quickly, that having a bank account and being financially savvy is actually a good way to start off on the path where you want to get to. We're starting to see the demographic of people who are starting up bank accounts getting lowered quite a bit.
Yeah, Banker are doing really good things, making financial literacy and numbers exciting rather than this idea that it needs to be ignored or neglected until it becomes a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly where we're going in terms of getting some good tooling that allows for personal finance management to work better. Customers being able to make smarter decisions based on data and making sure that that data is available to them in a consumable format, and that it's not something that they need to analyze themselves, but rather giving them the ability to go, here's some insights based on what you have been doing or what your financial profile looks like. And that's some exciting stuff where you really get a good sense of where you want to be and getting that view in front of the customers.
And that's another example of technology that's allowing this type of engagement to happen. I mean, Banker uses a digital platform to teach the students that are enrolled in the course, right?
Definitely. The building blocks that we provide will allow for some of those technologies not only to be enabled, but also enhanced as and when needed. That's effectively where we want to get to, is not necessarily be able to predict the future, but get to a point where we're nimble and flexible enough to be able to provide the right tools at the right times, so that when there is a need or a demand for a specific set of features, we are able to provide that. So it's not really about here's a golden standard that we want to get to in a decade's time. It's more about what are the building blocks and the foundational pieces that will allow us to get to whatever that future state may look like.
And how about your own journey? Did you always want to work in tech where you started, or how did that eventuate?
Oh, no, not at all. So when I started, tech was always there, but it wasn't something that I had put my heart and soul into. I'd started off doing a maths degree, and along the way, it became almost obvious that this is a good move, both from a financial perspective, but also from a interesting problems perspective. So if I had my own way, I would have gone in and done a maths degree and become a maths professor. But I think life had other things in mind. And so essentially ended up doing an internship with IBM, and then moved on to getting my first job offering with Oracle. And since then it's been constant. Like there hasn't been a reason for me to stop and think about doing something else. Although like mid-career, I did consider a law degree, and the amount of effort I would have had to put into changing careers and thinking about how to go about working through that scenario put me off like that very quickly, and I decided to stay on the same path in tech. Although tech is so broad now. There's multiple aspects of it. Every career touches tech in some shape or form. So it's not necessarily you have to go down a specific path to get into tech. A good example of this would be my wife, who started off doing a theatre major, and she went on to doing education, and then eventually ended up doing tech, and is here in New Zealand now working as a product manager in technology.
And I've heard that you and your partner are a bit of a power couple within the New Zealand tech sector.
Oh God, no, nothing of the sort. But we both did apply for the same role when we had first come into the country. And unfortunately for me, my wife did get the role before me, and then when she turned it down, it was offered to me.
So you were second choice. Oh, that's all right.
I was second choice.
And do you get to do much math in your role now?
No, I don't actually. Other than boring finances, I don't necessarily get to do a lot of maths. Get to look at spreadsheets once in a while. I got really excited when I saw differential equation presented to me in a paper that was given to me about how we were doing some compute work. But those come very rarely across my desk anymore. But don't regret it. I do enjoy what I do now. We're going down a really cool and interesting path. It's really good to be a part of this journey.
All right, Ranjit, thank you so much for speaking with me today. It's so good to learn more about your world, and I've learned a lot, so thanks very much.
Thanks, Michael. It was really good talking to you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
All righty, ka kite.
When the Facts Change was brought to you by the Spinoff Podcast Network, together with Kiwibank. Visit kiwibank.co.nz to find out how Kiwibank are making Kiwi better off.
Ready to rediscover the joys of cycling? With over 300 kilometres of cycle paths across Tāmaki Makaurau, jumping on your bike and going for a ride is such a fun way to discover the city from a different perspective. Cycling is getting more and more popular across Auckland, so now's a great time to join the hype and give cycling a go. Head to at.govt/cycling to find your nearest cycleway today. The Spinoff Podcast Network.